Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are playing as the Dark Elves against the force of the Vampire Counts on the map Rakdu Ridge. So starting this one out, I did see my opponent's body count, and I was definitely expecting a massive blob of infantry, and was shocked to see a cav army from the Vampire Counts, or a very cav focused army. So this ought to be an interesting match, and we'll definitely see how things break down. So for my Lord, I did bring Marathi. I do think she's pretty good. Honestly, all of the Dark Elf Lords have their niche, and all of them can be usable. But I definitely do like Marathi. She's fairly cheap. She does bring Heartburn and Dark Sword, as well as the Enchanting Beauty. So great melee attack debuff, almost 20% off your enemy's melee attack. And plus debuffs enemy melee defense, all that sort of stuff. I did bring Melkos Mystify Miasma, Pit of Shades, Power of Darkness, and Soul Stealer. So quite a bit of magic this time around, and Deadly Onslaught, just because I had a little bit of money spent left over, so I figured why not. Alongside her, I did bring a Death Hag on the Cauldron of Blood, which is the actual Cauldron of Blood will not do very much for me. Its combat stats are pretty miserable. It does apply poison, and it does have a bonus against infantry, but no AP. And Fear and Terror obviously doesn't help against undead, but it does provide the Blood Shield of Cain, which is 11% physical resist. It does provide Chill Blade, which is a further 5 melee attack debuff. So with Marathi, I can almost debuff enemy melee attack by 25%, and Fury of Cain, which I can apply to an ally to help them kind of chop their way out of a situation a little faster. Finally, my front line composed of 3 units of Blackguard and Nagron, so very thin front line. These guys I think are one of the best picks against Vampire Counts. Honestly, they're a really good pick in just about any matchup. Great melee stats, bonus against large, armor piercing, immunity to psychology, which is really the key benefit here, is the fact that they are immune to psychology, so if my opponent brings a bunch of terror-causing units, these guys will not simply break and run. They also do have 100 armor, and of course, they will hold their ground and trade effectively with literally every undead unit, except actually maybe not Karen Wraiths, but otherwise they'll outtrade just about every Vampire Count infantry unit. On the ground alongside them, I do have a War Hydra, so definitely a pick I don't usually bring, but it does have the breath attacks, which I figured could be good if I can get a nice angle on them, and it does have regen, which could be useful. Could help me. Could allow this unit to stay alive quite a bit, because obviously it doesn't have it. Vampires don't have missiles, so I don't have to worry about that sort of stuff. Most of their anti-large will struggle to, as long as I stay on top of the Blackguard, most of their anti-large would struggle to get on top of the War Hydra. Otherwise, though, I do figure it could be just a decent pick here, and I definitely think it can dish out some hurt. For my second line, I do have some Witch Elves and some Dread Spears. Nothing too fancy. Basically, just had some points left over, so I figured why not. I also do have 2 Dark Riders with repeated crossbows in case my opponent had brought a Mortis Engine or Corpse Guards or units like that. These guys are very good at shutting that sort of stuff down, whereas the rest of my army here really isn't equipped to deal with that. Maybe Marathi can goon it out, but it's still difficult. For my opponent, though, he did decide to go with a very interesting build, so let's kind of break it down. For his Lord, he did bring Vlad. Just kind of a decent. Honestly, there's nothing bad to say about Vlad. He did bring the Karstein Ring for that damage resist, Master of Beguilement, Wind of Death, Raise Dead, and Invocation of Nehek, as well as Blood Drinker. His front line is basically might as well not be there. Königstein Stalkers and 2 units of Skeleton Spears, backed by the Stearnsman, and a Vargulf. So another interesting pick here, the Vargulf. Pretty squishy unit, but it does have pretty good melee stats. It also does have regen, and the weapon strength is only 290 with AP, but I do believe its attack speed is actually pretty fast. It's got one of the faster attack speeds, and it's very mobile. 80 speed on a monstrous unit like that is crazy. On the flanks, my opponent does have, on this flank, he does have Black Knights, 2 units of Direwolves, and the Hex Wraiths. So bringing some nasty flanking force. The Direwolves can tie down anti-large, they can jump on shooting. Obviously, my opponent was probably expecting a bunch of shooting. The Black Knights, of course, can pile in and surround my troops, and the Hex Wraith will provide some fear and terror, and of course they do have a very high physical resist. On the other flank, it is a little different. Dire Pack, 2 Direwolves, and 2 Black Knights. The Black Knights are obviously not the most competitive of Vampire Counts cav. They're definitely on the weaker end, but nonetheless, they are pretty decent, especially for their cost. They have pretty good armor, decent weapon strength, decent melee attack and melee defense. Actually, I do believe better straight up melee stats than Black Knights with Lances and Barding. They just don't have the charge bonus and the armor. Well, as you can see, I do try to get a breath attack here on the Königstein Stalkers. Knock off about 8 models, so nothing impressive, but we are immediately closing the gap. I did see, of course, immediately I saw these flankers, and so I figured I need to get straight into the fight. And really, here with the Dark Riders, I really wasn't sure what to do, because my opponent had me completely encircled. There wasn't room to maneuver. He just had so many fast units, there was no way my Dark Riders could escape. And So things were definitely looking a little grim here. I did try to position my Dread Spears to zone away some of his troops, pulled my Dark Riders back into the box, but really there was no saving this. Here, I told the Witch Elves to attack the Dire Pack because, of course, they're good against small targets. But unfortunately, you can see the Dark Shards are going to get caught here in the middle. Got basically nothing done, and that's that. That said, my opponent did pile all of his cavalry here on top of my Dread Spear, so I do get a lovely pit of shades here. He actually accidentally pushes some Direwolves into there, and he's going to lose a massive chunk of his Hex rates, an entire unit of Dire Pack or Direwolves, and take some massive damage before these Dread Spears do break from terror from the Hex rates. Over here, the Dark Riders are just pinning these Black Knights in place. I actually pulled the Black Guard offline for fighting these spears just to engage the Black Knights, because the Black Guard, of course, will engage very well. Over here on the flank, Marathi has dove in to help against the Black Knights. The Hydra's in there applying its AP damage to these Black Knights, but now the Vargulf's diving in to help provide its own support. But I'm rampaging all of these units, so my opponent can't exactly control them, and that is definitely good for me, especially with the Black Guard in the mix. Now over here, the Skeleton Spears are getting slaughtered. Vlad is not doing well. I do believe the Königstein Stalkers have already been wiped. The Death Hag is very useful in this situation because she has very high armor at 80 or decent armor, and she's able to just plow through the infantry units. Unfortunately, my opponent does have the Sternsmen here who I really can't affect in any meaningful way, at least not right now, and so things are definitely a little grim. That said, I do get a beautiful Soul Stealer here, kind of helping wipe out these Direwolves, helping beat down the Hex Wraiths, and helping keep Marathi topped off, because really, with this much damage going off, she's really able to just stick around. Blackguard over here holding their own, fighting the Hex Wraiths on one end, fighting the Spears on the other. The Blackguard's really hard to break. They have about 100 leadership here. I do believe with some encouragement being applied, but they are immune to psychology, so really none of these units are leaving a dent in them. Over here, the Blackguard is rampaging because I dropped the Fury of Cain on them just to get a little more damage out of them. These guys don't have the best of melee attack stats, so I figured why not get a little bit more out of them. The Hex Wraiths over here getting hit by Melkoth's Mystify Miasma. I'm investing most of my magic into destroying them because I do see them as a big threat. They do have the AP, they have fire damage, which actually is better against Hydras, stuff like that. But you can see, if we actually throw things in slow-mo here and look at the Hex Wraiths, you can see they're down to 6 and 9 melee attack and melee defense. That's a huge debuff. They're losing about 80% of their melee attack and probably similar amount of their melee defense just because Marathi is nearby, and I think that's really pretty potent. As she pulls away, of course, that will kind of revert, but nonetheless a very, very powerful sort of effect there. And these guys will crumble and fall apart pretty shortly. In the meantime, though, Vargulf is definitely sticking around, doing his best, but he is getting surrounded by Witch Elves. Witch Elves obviously are not great against monsters, but they do okay. They have fairly high weapon strength against a squishy target like the Vargulf. They can do some damage. Over here, Blackguard are going 2-1 against Sternsmen. At this point, things are definitely evening out. You can see the Blackguard over here has held his ground just fine. Really, the main threat at this point is the Sternsmen, and actually some of my Dark Shards or Dark Riders. I actually used a Power of Darkness on them, but they actually helped out. They actually came back some, so they're now able to start picking away at the Vargulf. I've also been using the War Hydra as a battery with Power of Darkness because it does have self-healing, so it allows me to get more Winds of Magic without risking too much damage on it. And you can see the Vargulf here getting destroyed fairly quickly. Between Marathi's bonus against large and the War Hydra's raw offensive stats, she's doing pretty well. My opponent is, I do believe, trying to get a summon there. You can see it's another Power of Darkness goes down in the Hydra. Obviously, this will drain its HP a bit, but for a few Winds of Magic, I think it's worthwhile. The Vargulf here definitely not having the best time of it, just being hit from all sides. The Hydra has very good offensive stats in melee. It has very poor melee defense, so if you get stuck in amongst even vanilla spears, it'll get annihilated pretty quick. But it's not great if it gets caught in it's not great if it gets caught in a bunch of spears. So even Skeleton Spears can lay the smackdown on War Hydra, but against a unit like a Vargulf, where you're probably going to hit anyway, it's good. It has good offense stats that can bust through that decent melee defense. Over here, Soul Stealer is going down to Vlad, and really it's just a matter of time before this whole army crumbles. My opponent did plop the Karstein Ring, so he has 90% damage resist here, but it's at this point he just GG's out with the crumbling of his last few troops. So a really pretty interesting game. Definitely my opponent's build caught me by surprise. I've never actually seen cav heavy vampire, or I have seen cav heavy vampire builds, but usually it centers on Blood Knights. I've never seen builds that would center around Black Knights and this sort of low end cav. Personally, I don't think it's the best idea against Dark Elves, mostly because Dark Elves do have Blackguard. And I think Blackguard is a core pick if you're going to play as Dark Elves against, especially a faction like Undead. You really want to bring some Blackguard. you can see they racked up a bunch of stats, but the key advantage there was they just did not break. They've got immense leadership, and honestly, they're actually probably less breakable than Phoenix Guard. Phoenix Guard is susceptible to fear and terror, not fear, but terror. So they can potentially be terror routed, and that can result in a snowball effect where they fall apart at lower HP levels. Whereas Blackguard, even if they get beaten down a good bit, because of their immunity psychology, they'll stick around to the bitter end. They of course have that monstrous melee defense. And all that AP. And you can see these guys all gained a bunch of chevrons. Even the Witch Elves actually gained some chevrons too, because they slaughtered the Dire Pack and some of the Dire Wolves. I think the Witch Elves are definitely, and I think it's something people don't realize, but oftentimes bringing a unit like Plague Monks or Witch Elves for Plague Monks in case of Skaven, but obviously bringing one of these squishy anti-infantry units just for backline defense can be a decent choice. These sorts of units can slaughter units like Dire Wolves and Bats and that sort of stuff very, very quickly. Death Hag and Morathi did quite a bit of work. The Death Hag ranked in 100 kills, and I do believe using those buffs on the Blackguard was very useful because it gave him because obviously I wasn't about to go anywhere. I wasn't chasing a backline, so getting that rampage on him in exchange for massive boosts to damage output was very useful. And Morathi got massive value out of Pit of Shades and Soul Stealer and even Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma. My opponent definitely had a bit of a disadvantage there because he had to clump up a whole bunch to surround me, and that basically played right into my strengths with Morathi, or with Morathi's spell selection. For my opponent's build, I do think it was interesting. I do think a little more AP was warranted, maybe some Graveguard with great weapons, something to wipe out the Blackguard. You always want to have tools to deal with Blackguard, and this list didn't really have them. Hex rates are not ideal. Hex rates, obviously, the Fear and Terror won't apply. And despite having armor piercing, their melee stats are so bad that they won't hit Blackguard very often. Even on the charge, they won't do well. And the Vargulf, basically a similar issue. It tends to take a lot of damage. It can jump around like a crazy monster that it is, but it's not going to do that much damage. So really, I think a handful of Graveguard weapons instead of so many Dire Wolves might have been a good choice, just to trade okay with the Blackguard, because my opponent basically wiped the rest of my backline pretty effectively. And if you can isolate the War Hydra, of course, that's game for it. Nonetheless, good game to my opponent McLean here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. I do hope you found it is enjoyable and entertaining, and hopefully shows just how powerful the Blackguard can be. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about the game or anything like that, be sure to share those, and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.